My name is Kara Leland. I'm 35, a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army, and I've spent most of my life learning how to disappear in rooms filled with men who only see what they expect. I don't wear my past on my uniform, but it sits under the fabric like a second skin. People see my rank and assume someone believed in me to get this far. They'd be wrong. I grew up in a military household where respect was earned, not given, and softness was considered a flaw. My father, Colonel Thomas Leland, ran our home like a base tight routines, no nonsense, zero tolerance for weakness. He didn't yell or hit. He didn't have to. Disappointment hung in the air like smoke, thick enough to choke you. My mother passed when I was 9. Ovarian cancer, fast and cruel. After that, our house felt like a vacuum. My father filled the silence with structure, and the warmth left with her. He never said he wished I had been a boy. He didn't have to. It showed in the way he spoke to the sons of his peers and left me out of conversations at the dinner table. I tried. God, I tried. I learned to tie knots before I turned 10, memorized the NATO phonetic alphabet from an old field manual I found in the attic. When I showed him, he barely looked up. "Neat trick," he said, flipping a page in his paper. "But that won't help you bake a cake." I was 11. By the time I hit high school, I could load and clean a rifle faster than most kids could solve a math problem. But none of it made a dent. He didn't come to my ROTC award ceremony. Said he had a prior engagement, even though I saw his car in the driveway when I left. It was the kind of dismissal that didn't raise its voice but buried you just the same. I think a part of me kept chasing that invisible finish line, thinking maybe if I was good enough, strong enough, something would shift. But in his world, a daughter was a placeholder for a son who never came. And I grew up believing I had to apologize just for wanting to stand in his shadow. I decided during my senior year, not out of rebellion, not to prove a point, but because something in me needed a different kind of structure. One that didn't shrink me down to what I was supposed to be, but built me into something I chose to become. When I told my father I'd accepted my Army enlistment offer, he didn't look surprised, just smug. "You won't last 3 months," he said, folding his arms like he was settling into a truth he'd known all along. "You don't have the spine for it. And the Army doesn't have time to babysit little girls who want to play soldier." He said it over breakfast. Same table we'd sat at for years. Same seat across from me. But something changed in that moment. The oatmeal in my bowl went cold. I didn't touch it. I just stared at the edge of my spoon, hearing that phrase on repeat. "You don't have the spine." It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. The kind that comes when a door slams, and you realize you're already halfway through it. I didn't try to convince him. I didn't ask for his blessing. I knew what it would cost me. But I also knew I'd spent too many years making myself smaller, so he wouldn't have to feel disappointed. I was done shrinking. He offered me a list of better paths, civil service jobs. "Admin works at the VA. At least there, you won't get anyone killed," he said without blinking. "You don't have the kind of grit combat demands. That uniform isn't stitched for people like you." The day I left, he didn't come downstairs. My ride honked once and waited. I stood in the hallway with my duffel over one shoulder and a deployment folder tucked under my arm. The air smelled like polished wood and old silence. Same as always. I stared at the photo of my mother in the entryway mirror and whispered goodbye. No hug, no handshake, no eye contact. Just the sound of the front door closing behind me and the weight of 10 years pressed into a 30-pound pack. I didn't cry. Not then. There's something about silence that dries your eyes before the tears can reach the surface. The car ride to base was quiet. My friend, Jules, drove me. She kept glancing over, like she wanted to say something, but didn't. I think she knew there wasn't space for comfort that morning. Not when the person who was supposed to care the most had made his position loud and clear. At the gate, I stepped out, adjusted my straps, and looked back one last time. Nothing. No waving figure, no last-minute change of heart. Just a quiet street and a house that had never felt like home. I walked through the checkpoint and didn't look back again. If there was any doubt left in me, it stayed on that sidewalk, somewhere between the cracked cement and the ghost of a father who never saw me as enough. The first weeks broke me down in ways I didn't expect. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. Every morning started in darkness and ended in silence. And somewhere in between, I learned how to survive without needing to be seen. They didn't say it outright, but I heard it in their tone. The smirks, the side comments, the way the drill sergeant paused an extra beat when calling my name. I wasn't the first woman in that unit, but I might as well have been invisible. I was smaller, slower, quieter. My push-ups lagged. My runs were borderline. I threw up behind the barracks on day 6 and didn't tell anyone. I knew if I did, they'd chalk it up to weakness. Not exhaustion, not dehydration, just weakness. At night, I replayed every mistake on a loop. The botched formation, the way my voice cracked during the weapons drill. My bunkmate, Gomez, never said much. But one night, she handed me her last protein bar without a word. That was the closest thing I had to a vote of confidence. I didn't call home. Not once. I knew what I'd hear. Or worse, what I wouldn't. So I kept my head down, watched the others, and pushed through. It wasn't pride that kept me going. It was something quieter. Stubbornness, maybe? A refusal to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Every night I fell asleep sore, and every morning I woke up sore again. But I got better. Bit by bit. Not stronger than them, just less likely to stop. That was enough to earn space. Not respect. Not yet. But space. And I took it. Things began to shift during our second joint exercise with Allied forces. It was supposed to be a routine simulation. Just drills and coordination. But when the comms dropped mid-briefing and the interpreters froze under pressure, I stepped in. I didn't ask. I translated, reorganized the call sheet, and rerouted the sequence through a fallback channel. It wasn't dramatic. It was efficient. When it ended, our unit leader looked at me differently. Not surprised, just focused, like he'd finally seen something worth noting. A week later, I was reassigned to a multinational task group stationed along a remote corridor. Language barriers had slowed progress. Misread intentions had caused setbacks. I wrote a new comms flow in 3 dialects and taught the team how to identify nonverbal cues across different command styles. I wasn't louder. I was clearer. I started leading without asking for permission. My rank didn't change, but responsibilities did. One morning, a captain from a partner unit handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter confirming my role as team lead for an upcoming logistics operation. No fanfare, no ceremony, just orders, trust, and an extra stripe next to my name on the roster. I still didn't talk much about where I came from. If they asked, I kept it short. Midwest. Military kid. Moved a lot. End of story. What mattered now wasn't who I used to be. It was who I showed up as every day. Calm under pressure. Precise in execution. And slowly, without trying to prove anything, I earned space not just in the room, but at the table. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Plain. Cream-colored. No markings aside from the seal pressed into the flap. The return address was listed only as Departmental Coordination, Internal Honors Review. There was no letter inside, just a single printed card. Date, time, location. Red Ridge Command Hall. No dress code, no agenda, no name listed above the RSVP checkbox. But I knew what it was. It was the kind of invitation you don't get by accident. I stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was a reward or a warning. My name wasn't on the official program. I checked. Twice. Not as a speaker, not as an honoree, not even as a guest. It was a closed-door event. Recognition for unsung contributions to encrypted field intelligence, the briefing said. The kind of line that could mean anything or nothing at all. I packed my standard issue uniform. No rank, no ribbon, no patches. The morning of the ceremony, the air was colder than I expected. The sky sat low and gray over the asphalt. I arrived early and was seated quietly in the third row, far right. Seat 4. No one looked at me twice. Most of them didn't know my face. They knew my work only as code names and case numbers. To them, I was either a myth or back-end support. Either way, forgettable. I scanned the room, a few general officers, task force directors. Some men I recognized from command chains, others I'd only seen in classified memos. And then I saw him. Row 1, Seat 2. Colonel Thomas Leland. My father. His posture hadn't changed. Back straight, hands folded, not a strand of silver hair out of place. He looked proud, or at least like someone who had come expecting to be proud of himself. He didn't see me. Not yet. There was no reason he would. In this setting, I was background. I had learned to blend in so well that it became a habit. Still, something in me shifted when I saw his name in the program. Bold letters. Acknowledgement for his early contributions to framework architecture in military-grade encryption systems. I felt something sharp move behind my ribs. Not anger, not fear, just gravity. Like the weight of something that had been waiting a long time to fall. The room grew quiet as the lights dimmed. A general stepped up to the podium. No script. No teleprompter. Just a folder in one hand and a gaze that cut through the room like a blade. I sat still, every muscle locked in place, because I knew the moment was coming. I just didn't know what it would cost when it arrived. The room was dressed in quiet formality. Flags aligned behind the stage. Every crease in every uniform looked pressed by authority itself. The lighting was soft but controlled, casting a calm tension across the rows. High brass sat in the front, their expressions unreadable, shaped by decades of strategy and secrets. Name placards gleamed under the overhead lights. Colonel Thomas Leland sat perfectly centered, second from the left. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. In his mind, he was exactly where he belonged. Recognized. Elevated. Expected. I sat just behind him. 3 rows back. 1 row too far to be visible. 1 heartbeat too close to be missed. My hands rested on my lap, steady but tight. I watched the back of his head, the slight tilt of his chin, the familiar rigidity of his posture. He hadn't changed. The host called the ceremony to order. Applause rose, then settled. A series of names was read aloud, each followed by brief nods, quick handshakes, and assured claps. It felt rehearsed, almost surgical. I watched him rise when his name was called. He straightened his jacket with precision, walked forward with the slow pride of a man used to being acknowledged. The audience clapped politely. No one questioned it. He returned to his seat with the same composed stride. He didn't know that behind him, someone else had just stood taller, even without moving. I stayed seated, eyes forward, breath held in a place between restraint and reckoning. The moment was close now. You could feel it in the stillness, like a door about to open, and no one knows yet which way it will swing. The general stepped forward, no speech, no preamble, just a pause long enough to make the room lean forward. Then he said it. 6 words. We need Lieutenant Specter in the room. Ugh. Silence dropped like a hammer. 1 second. 2. Then, row by row, officers stood. No whisper. No hesitation. Just movement. As if the air itself had been waiting for the signal. My father turned, confused. His eyes scanned the seats behind him. Slowly. Searching. Then they landed on mine. And in that moment, his spine stiffened, not from pride, but disbelief. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared, frozen in a room that was no longer his. The daughter he had dismissed, overlooked, and ignored was now the reason the room stood still. I rose. 1 movement. Calm. Controlled. I didn't smile, didn't nod. I simply stepped forward, past him, past the row of medals and names and histories that had once kept me out. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence cracked louder than any applause. I felt his gaze follow me, not with judgment this time, but reckoning. The general didn't call my name again. He didn't need to. It wasn't about the title anymore. It was about presence. And in that moment, I wasn't a shadow. I was the one they stood for. It came at 2:06 a.m. No subject line, no sender, just one flagged file in my secure inbox. The message was short, 11 words. If I sign a confession, will you go public? No greeting, no explanation, just the question. It was him. I didn't need a signature to know. The phrasing was exact, the tone controlled, clipped, almost casual, was unmistakably his. I stared at the screen. No reaction, no panic, just quiet recognition. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was assessing risk, still trying to control the story, even when the story was no longer his. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit. Let him feel what it's like to wait for a word that may never come. He wasn't afraid of guilt. He was afraid of losing the version of himself that others still believed in. He wanted assurance, a deal, a power trade dressed in humility, but I saw through it. This wasn't a man seeking truth. It was a man trying not to fall alone. At dawn, I wrote back one line. No, but I'm not the child afraid of light anymore. I didn't sign it either. He would know, just like I knew. That day, I went on with my shift. Quiet, focused. I checked systems, reviewed data logs, and issued 2 reports. Nothing had changed, except everything had. And somewhere across the country, I imagined him alone. Not in disgrace, not yet, but unraveling, because silence had always been his shield, and now it was mine. A week later, the tribunal confirmed it. He had walked in on his own. No subpoena, no external pressure. Just a quiet arrival at the Ethics Board's office in Arlington at 0900 sharp. They said he brought no lawyer, no files, just a small notepad and a folded document. When asked for a statement, he stood, looked each officer in the eye, and said, "I authorized a contractor I didn't vet." He didn't offer context, didn't redirect blame. He acknowledged fast-tracking an encryption framework 6 years ago, based on personal trust, not protocol. "I failed to review the architecture," he said. I ignored the warnings in the metadata. There were pauses between his words, heavy ones, but not from hesitation, from weight, the kind you only feel when speaking without a defense for the first time in your life. Then came the part they didn't expect. One officer asked if he knew who uncovered the breach. He looked down, looked back up, and said, "No, but I suspect I owe her everything." He never said my name, but he didn't need to. The room understood. So did I. In the official transcript, one sentence was underlined and flagged. I accept all consequences. But I ask only one thing. Keep my daughter's name off the record. He called me his daughter, not lieutenant, not a soldier, not Specter. For once, not a placeholder. A word he'd avoided for decades, now spoken in front of men who once saluted him. He lost his clearance, returned his credentials. His name was quietly removed from advisory lists and legacy task forces. No headlines followed, just the closing of a chapter that had stayed open too long. He didn't call, didn't write, but I heard what I needed. Not perfect, not redemptive, but real. And maybe, for both of us, that was enough. It came in a plain envelope. No return address, no note inside, just a small velvet pouch and the quiet weight of something I hadn't touched since I was 8. His West Point pin, the same one he used to polish before every inspection. The one he once told me was, for soldiers, not spectators. I remembered reaching for it once as a kid. Curious, wanting to understand what made it so important. He'd pulled it away like it was sacred, untouchable, off limits. Now it sat in my palm. No words, no explanation, just metal and silence. But this time, it didn't feel like rejection. It felt like recognition. He hadn't signed a letter, hadn't tried to explain or rewrite anything. He didn't need to. The gesture said enough. He had held onto this pin for decades. Through wars, through retirement, through every moment, he refused to see me. And now he had given it up. Not in defeat, in acknowledgement. A quiet admission that I had earned what he once thought I couldn't even understand. I closed my fingers around it and breathed. No anger, no triumph. Just a kind of stillness I hadn't known I was waiting for. I didn't need a letter. I didn't need him to say the words. I had become my own proof. Of worth, of strength, of survival. For years, I chased a voice that would say, I was enough. Today, I no longer need to hear it. I had become it. And somehow, in giving back the one symbol he never shared, my father finally gave me the one thing I stopped hoping for. Not praise, not pride, just peace.